Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I am fortunate to have Stanley Crooke. Stanley is the founder and former CEO of Ionis Pharmaceuticals. He has also published more than 500 scientific publications, edited more than 20 books, has numerous patents, and led the development of more than 23 drugs that have been commercialized, and is now the founder and CEO of n-Lorem Foundation. Uh, that's just a quick summary of Stanley's career. He's done a ton more and won a ton of awards. But Stanley, thank you so much for being on.
I'm pleased to be here.
Awesome. So take it back to the beginning. Where you were born, where you grew up, the time period, and maybe your family situation, things of that nature.
I was born, I think, in Indianapolis, Indiana, though that's not absolutely certain.
Mhm.
Um, and in the mid 1940s, I was born, and the exact date of my birth is not absolutely certain as well.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know who my father was, but uh, in the first several years of my life, I lived with my grandmother, great grandmother, and two cousins, and then moved in with my mother and stepfather somewhat later.
Cool. Cool. Uh, where did you grow up?
Indianapolis,
Awesome.
downtown Indianapolis.
Cool. Cool. Um, what was I guess what stands out for you as from your younger years? Were you always interested in science, or was there, what type of kid were you?
No, I didn't know anything about science or medicine. I think I had been to the doctor maybe once or twice in my life before I went to college. People in my neighborhood didn't typically go to doctors much. Uh, and uh, I was, and my interests were being anywhere and doing anything than where I was and what I saw people doing in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Um, I guess so. Going into your high school and college years, can you talk about your process and what drew you to Butler?
Uh, yeah, in brief, um, I went to grade school in downtown Indianapolis, and I went to a high school called Arsenal Technical High School, which was again in downtown Indianapolis. It was very large. I think at that time, well over 5,000 day students and 3 or 4,000 night students. Um, and uh, was in put in special classes for the gifted in grade school. And in high school, I was a pretty lousy student, didn't attend school too much, but managed to graduate and entered Purdue University in aeronautical engineering uh, because I thought that's what smart people did, and was at Purdue for a year and a half, and then for primarily because my girlfriend and first wife was ill. I moved back to Indianapolis, and the only trade school there was a pharmacy school, and I'd grown up working in little drugstores. So then I went to pharmacy school at Butler, where again I was not much of a student.
Okay. Uh, Talk to us about, you know, did you, in terms of following in the sciences, did you have um, somebody, were your parents at all like, you know,
My parents had never graduated from high school.
okay.
No one in my family had ever graduated from high school,
Yeah.
uh, and so no. Uh, and uh, and as I say, I wasn't very interested in going to school, and I worked 40 to 50 hours a week throughout high school, actually, and college,
Yeah.
and um, um, had a lecture in biochemistry from one of the worst professors I've ever encountered, and I encountered my share. But he talked about cancer, and I got interested in that. And then I was, despite my lousy grades, I managed to get into law school, and also I was asked by the dean of the pharmacy school, whom I'd abused mercilessly, if I wanted to go to graduate school. And I decided, well, I did actually both. I went to law school and graduate school for a short while running a drugstore. And
Wow.
then I did my master's, quit law school, and did my master's in pharmacology, and then applied to various medical schools. Was rejected by almost all of them, but was accepted to, this was before MD, PhD programs were formal, and was accepted by the Baylor Medical School in Houston, Texas, for reasons that I still don't understand. And I applied there mostly because the Astrodome was new, and I wanted to go down to Houston and see the Astrodome. And that turned out to be a great decision. I met the closest thing to a father I really had, Harris Bush. He was my mentor, and his family, his wife and he became family to me. And did my MD, PhD there, and did my residency at Baylor. And then while I was doing other things, on the faculty at Baylor for more than 25 years as well. So Baylor was meeting Harris Bush, who was an MD, PhD, head of pharmacology at Baylor. And my introduction to Baylor were really pivotal moments in my life that introduced me to real science and real medicine. And once I was introduced to those topics, then I became, um, you know, much more serious about what I was doing.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, your parents didn't even graduate from high school, during your college and your graduate studies, how are you navigating this? How are you, because you don't have a blueprint of that. So,
I had never known anyone who had gone to college other than teachers who I considered the enemy. And I had never been to a college until the day I walked into Purdue, and I was lost throughout most of my time.
yeah,
Uh, and um, so, as they say, I learned on the job.
yeah. At some point, I mean, you talk a little bit about being, maybe a bad student. That obviously changed, and you became very,
When
very
I went to Baylor, and when I was introduced to real medicine and real science, and Harris Bush, who taught me to be very demanding of myself and everyone else. He was certainly a very demanding person,
yeah,
and that, as I said, changed my life.
yeah. I guess for anybody hearing this, if they're interested in the sciences, and whether it's a MD, PhD or not, maybe what's one piece of advice that that worked for you or that you took out of, obviously you talk about your close relationship with, Bush. Uh, what are some pieces of advice for people? Uh,
Find something you love and do it.
yeah,
It's pretty simple.
yeah,
I was lucky enough to stagger into finding something I loved and still love. It's a precious gift to be able to do science and care for patients. It's a privilege. And I've never, ever forgotten a moment in my career that it's a privilege to do what I do. And, and then, work.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
worker. That's really what I am.
yeah. So after you finished at Baylor, what were you up to?
Uh, Actually, while I was a student, I was. actually, in medical school, I was teaching pharmacology at Baylor to the class ahead of me, actually,
Wow.
and doing research on small molecular weight RNAs. And I had a patient that I wasn't responsible for caring for him. Obviously, I was a medical student working with the team, but he was referred to Baylor because he had a mass in his abdomen, which we learned was a disseminated testicle cancer. And in those days, disseminated testicular cancer was a death sentence for young men. It was the most common solid tumor in young men, and it was typically about 6 months. Um, and I got interested in that disease and an experimental drug that he was taking, which was called bleomycin. Switched my research to focus on that drug, really. And as I finished my residency, of course, I was on my way. I was already being promoted to associate professor, and I was offered other positions in other medical schools. But I chose to call the company that had the drug, which turned out to be Bristol Myers, and ask for a job mostly because I wanted to work on bleomycin.
Yeah.
And they had the drug and the analogs, and I thought they had a cancer program, but they didn't. It had been just a screening contract with the NCI, and so I took the opportunity there in the first 5 years of my career to lead the building of the first broadly um, um, focused anti-cancer program in the industry at that time. If you can imagine it, the conventional wisdom was you couldn't make money in cancer. Um, and had the privilege of putting 9 anti-cancer drugs on the market, including bleomycin and cisplatin, which when Larry Einhorn combined with cisplatin took testicular cancer from a death sentence to a cure at a terrible toxicologic price, but still a cure, which was certainly a high point in my life and my career. At that point, I was still seeing patients, and so I got to see it.
Yeah.
Got promoted rapidly, became a vice president a couple of years after I entered as an entry level person. Over time, assumed responsibility for a large part of R&D. And then I was recruited by several companies to be head of R&D. And ultimately, I chose to go to what was Smith Klein Beckman then, SKB, which became GSK. And I was president of R&D there for 8 years. In the meantime, I was a full professor at Baylor. And then when I moved to Philadelphia, I became a full professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and very active appointments. Continued to train graduate students throughout that period. Had a fairly significant number of Ph.D. students complete. Um, uh, and so it was a very fortunate early career with, just being the right guy with the right skills in the right place several times. And I became president of R&D, I think, when I was 35 or so,
Yeah.
which I think at that time, and I think it still is, probably the youngest person to ever do that.
What do you think separated you? Obviously every year there's people entering, jobs at pharmaceutical companies and life science companies. Within 4 to 5 years you went to vice president of, research. What separated you versus the person next to you?
I was very well trained, and I was one of the first really high-powered molecular biologists, molecular pharmacologists to enter the industry. In those days, it simply wasn't done unless you went to work.
Yeah.
And so I had, the ideal training. I was a pharmacist. I really understood drugs, and I think I was born to do it, and I worked hard.
Yeah.
So, and I was lucky.
Yeah. How are you managing working full time and being a professor?
Um, I just did it.
Yeah.
I don't. I never needed much sleep.
Yeah.
Always worked sort of night and day anyway, just to make enough money to buy food
Yeah.
and take care of my family. And luckily, I didn't need much sleep then, maybe 3 hours,
Wow.
and I worked. So, and I did what I enjoyed. So,
Yeah.
there's no particular special answer. I just did it.
Yeah. That's incredible. So at this time, I mean, you became vice president at Smith Klein Beckman, um,
Uh-huh,
and then in 1989 you founded Ionis Pharmaceutical. Was
uh-huh,
it, you know, entrepreneurship is a totally different game than being, you know, the vice president at a high level company, because now it's on you. You're not reporting to anyone. Now you're your own boss. So was that something that you had always had in your mind, that if I get the chance, I'm going to start a company, or what was the thought process there?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'd always been responsible for myself. I was managing people in little drugstores when I was 19. So being a leader manager was really very second nature to me. Um, and I felt that the industry was failing because it didn't invest wisely in new technologies for drug discovery, needed a much more efficient drug discovery technology. I thought the probability that antisense would succeed was near zero. Almost everyone agreed with me on that. And that it would be 20 years and probably $2 billion before I would know. Um, but I thought its properties made it worth investing. And I didn't say that quite that boldly to investors, potential investors, but I was fairly.
Yeah.
So I founded it to do the technology, and I also founded it to create a much more innovative, research intense environment, and, and a business model that I think is unique in the industry, um, because I felt all those things were needed. And, and somehow managed to raise the money, and I led the science and the business, and we survived um, 20 plus years of actually outright hostility toward the technology and disappointments because you have to have them, challenges. So somehow we did it, and we are, I think, responsible for the technology existing. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. What what's the difference in going from, you know, a scientist and now, you know, an entrepreneur? What's the difference?
I've never stopped being a scientist. I would not stop
Well,
being a
entrepreneur
scientist.
and scientist, I guess. You
Yeah.
added another one.
Well, it's just not particularly different. I mean, I talk to investors all the time when I was head of R&D.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking to investors to raise money and doing partnerships to raise money and for strategic purposes and leading science and drug development, which are things that are second nature to me. So it's not, it was, um, you know, the whole idea of tackling antisense was felt insane to people. And
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because obviously nowadays that's mainstream and there's a lot of research going on in that field. But can you give,
well, it was just,
especially,
I mean, the attitude was justified. It was all, I mean, you were creating from a blank piece of paper a totally new technology based on chemicals that had never been made, chemistry that had never been done, biology that had never been explored. Now I'm not focused on proteins where all other drug discovery was, but RNA. Um, Everything, every possible challenge was there and had to be solved. And then you had to do it over and over again in the clinic to prove that it worked. So the skepticism was, entirely appropriate given the challenges that we face. The negative attitudes or the negative approach to antisense, which does seem to me a little unique, I can't explain. I do know that for many years we were the sole voice saying that progress is being made and um, and that we thought it might work. All the other companies that got started in space gave up or failed, and so I think being the single voice saying, yeah, this technology has potential and it's worth investing in was very challenging and hard on all of us. Nothing harder for a scientist than to have your basic and scientific integrity and judgment question.
Yep.
Um, and so I would say that was the hardest part. I mean, obviously raising money and,
Yeah.
raising several $billion, it, um, is fairly challenging, especially with a technology that's largely dismissed as never being impossible to work. But beyond that, it's just running an organization and doing science and medicine and drug discovery and development, which is stuff I've been doing all my life now, all my adult life.
Yeah. Was there ever a point at which you thought you might, quit or close the company down and
There
quit?
were moments when I didn't believe I'd be able to raise the money to keep going. The worst was when we had a set of failures in phase 3 trials, Affinitac and Alicaforsin, the termination of a large partnership we had. That was in 2000. Our stock was at $3, roughly, 3.5. And I did not see any way that we'd be able to raise the kind of money we needed to go forward. And yet I knew that we had made advances that would make the technology probably feasible. And there, the genomics bubble saved us. And I was trying to raise money in LA. I started the day at our stock price of $3.25. I think that's about right. And somewhere along in the middle of the day, a fund manager that I was meeting with said, your stock's at $40 a share. And I said, no, you mean $4 a share.
Yeah.
And he said, 40. And that was the genomics bubble. That then allowed us to raise money at a valuation that we had never seen. And so that was the worst moment. And I didn't do anything to save us there other than keep trying. It was just the genomics bubble that saved us that time.
What's the hardest part about being a CEO? I mean, obviously there's these ups and downs, there's raising money, there's managing people, and then
Well,
there's the science itself.
is an enormously complicated company.
Yeah.
We have the pipeline of a large company. We have the technology constantly advancing. We have the financial statement, with multiple sources of revenue with partners and so on. So as Ionis prospered, it really is just integrating all of those things into an equation that you can write to solve to help you pick the best approach out of all the various approaches that may be available given the scale. And we've deliberately tried to stay small, which put a lot of pressure on the senior people, which was by design. So to be tackling a pipeline of nearly 50 drugs in development involving almost all therapeutic areas with 300 to 400 people was an interesting challenge. Um, and so I think just having the bandwidth to do all that, I was very lucky to have that. And then integrating all these various pressures and disparate positions and points of view into an effective solution on a day-to-day basis, I think is the central challenge of being a CEO of a company as complicated as Ionis is.
How did you manage, you know, personal life and work? I mean, because at your level, the CEO level, I'm sure there's, there's always things that can be, there's always things on the to-do list that can be done. But I mean, you're a human being too, and you need downtime. And I mean, do you even believe in work-life balance? I mean, how did you manage just being a human during those years?
Uh, well, I believe the whole notion of work versus life is a side product and a negative one of the Industrial Revolution. Before that happened, people worked there. Work was a part of who they were. John the Miller, Fred the Baker, and you worked your life. So I don't see life that way. I see work as a central part of life, for being a fulfilling part of life, one of the ways of fulfilling your life. Um, and, meeting all the obligations that one has. My first wife was very sick and in hospitals and died eventually after we were married 20 years. My son had some challenges. So those are hard. Those are not, there's nothing easy about any of it.
Yeah.
And I don't have an explanation for, and I certainly don't have a prescription for others of how you live with all that pressure and how you make those balances. I'm sure uh, that I could have made better choices somewhere along the way, but those are just, that comes, I think every person who is committed to doing something must face the issue of all the demands on you as a human being, your family, your own personal interests, your life outside the work. But there's no general principle I can think of to follow. You just do your best.
Yeah. Do you feel like you had a supportive family that understood, you know, your passion?
I certainly do for the last 35 years since I remarried after my first wife died. But in the first, uh, you know, 15 or so years of my career, I would say probably not.
Yeah. Sounds good. And then so I guess what was, we talked a little bit about some of the downs, but talk to me about some of the, the good parts of what you accomplished at Ionis, and what were some of the, the best days that you had there?
The good infinitely outweighs the bad. Just the privilege of being able to create a new drug discovery technology is astonishing. That we did it is astonishing. And we did it almost single-handedly is astonishing. And that we were able to bring quite a number of antisense drugs to the market already and have a pipeline that, says, we're going to be bringing many, many more drugs that change not just rare diseases, but high incidence diseases. That's a privilege. All of those are high points. Spinraza, our drug to treat patients with spinal muscular atrophy, is the single most remarkable drug I've ever encountered. It took a disease that was catastrophic and immediately fatal in the neonate to cure with essentially no side effects. And its benefits are tangible. Most of the time we compare numbers, but here we could watch these babies and children grow and develop like normal, healthy children. There isn't, I can't imagine anything more satisfying than that experience with Spinraza was. Um, so the whole ride was exhilarating, and it's punctuated by even higher points of achievement of medicines that no one but we thought were possible.
Yeah.
Um, And, to see the advances in understanding RNA biology and genomics contribute to our ability to do so much good is just, it's all high. There's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
you asked me
changing
to talk
lives.
about you asked me to talk about what was hard and what was difficult. It doesn't even come to my mind. The only thing that comes to my mind is all the good that we're doing today and all the good for patients we're going to do in the future. What do you, if that doesn't qualify for elation and make you want to come to work every day, then you probably ought to consider resigning from life. I mean, it's all high.
Yeah,
It's all high. Everything is high.
yeah,
It's a privilege.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess do you want to talk about n-Lorem Foundation and what was the incentive behind that?
Yes, um, it became, I think the remarkable feature of n-Lorem, let's just talk about what it is. It is a charitable foundation that I initiated in January of this year. Its mission, if you can imagine this, is to bring experimental ASO treatment to patients with ultra rare diseases. That is, patients that have a mutation that might be in 10 or 20 patients in the whole world, and to do that for free for life.
Well,
Before antisense technology was invented, it certainly would have been inconceivable to me, and it was inconceivable until about 3 years ago, when I realized that given how efficient the technology is and how efficient we are at Ionis, and we're unique in what we can do, that it actually would be feasible. Once I realized that, it became a moral question. If I could do it, how could I not? It doesn't mean we can help every one of these patients, but being unable to help some doesn't mean you shouldn't help the people you can. So then I spent the next couple of years working through the process, making sure that there was a reasonable opportunity for it to work, meeting with the FDA senior leadership to sense whether they would be supportive. And then once I worked all that out, we founded the company with $1.5 million or the foundation, $1.5 million that my wife and I provided, which is shocking to me that I moved from a place where I didn't know if I could eat on some days. Well, I knew I couldn't, to a place where I can give that kind of money away. Again, just fortunate. $1.5 million from Ionis and $1 million from Biogen, and we opened our doors, and the response has been very gratifying. And where we are, the progress that we've made is just astonishing to me. So it was put together for the sole purpose of trying to do something about this particular type of patient. These patients in the past centuries simply died without ever having a diagnosis.
yeah,
And today, thanks to genomics and NIH support in things like the Undiagnosed Disease Network, these patients are being brought in, genomically characterized, and provided a diagnosis, which is wonderful. But a diagnosis without any hope is still hopeless. And so our spot is to work as a middleman, bringing the patient who needs and the investigator who has a need to the engine, which is the Ionis engine, to bring therapy to these patients. And while we were putting n-Lorem together, we were helping some investigators already get some experimental ASOs to do this. So we have already significant experience saying that this can be very beneficial. And you may ask, how frequent are these patients? Well, any individual mutation is 1 in 20, or one person, 20 people or 30 people in the world. But the number of these that are being identified now, thanks to genomic, is enormous. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these desperate patients and families who have for centuries simply died and gone to their death without any understanding of why they were suffering. Often it's babies and children, without ever having any hope and often being misunderstood. Even today, most of these patients spend 5 to 6 years going from doctor to doctor and center to center before they're diagnosed. So you have this growing number of patients thanks to the revolution in genomics, which is a growing level of a pool of extraordinary desperation. And 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 we have the tool that can help some of these patients. n-Lorem, since we founded it, we expected that we would, because the applications are very long, very complex, because we require all that genomic information, we require understanding what the disease is, has to be filled out by a research-intensive investigator. It is beyond a normal practice.
Yeah.
So we expected, we hoped that we might treat a couple, 3 patients in our first year, and that we might have applications for treatment for maybe 10. We've averaged more than an application a week. Right now we've been able to treat about not quite 40%, and those treatments are in progress. That's much higher than I think will be what we experience in the future, because there are many, many mutations where antisense simply isn't a tool that can fix them.
Yeah.
And we're focused on 4 organs: the central nervous system, the lungs, the kidney, and the liver, because those are the organs we really understand very well, and we understand the dose, and so we think it's a prudent risk to expose these patients to. The livers and kidneys systemically administered, the lung by aerosol, and of course in the central nervous system by intrathecal administration. And we're on our way now to treating almost, I think we're not quite up to 10 patients that are in the process of identifying the ASO and getting the IND filed and all that. So it's been a great success so far. I hadn't intended to raise money until I was sure it was up and running and working. But nevertheless, we've already added another $1 million plus, and my wife and I will contribute annually about the same amount. I'm hopeful that both Biogen and Ionis will. And so we have the technology to do it. These people have the need for us to be meeting their needs, and we have sufficient dollars to do some of what I hope to do in the future. Of course, obviously, now that we're up and running and I know it works, we're just beginning to go out formally and raise money, and that's always challenging because there are many other appropriate sites for philanthropers to give their money. And in the midst of COVID-19, the fact that we've had all these submissions, and the fact that we are actually making any progress in raising money is rather surprising to me. And I think that the reason for that is that the story is compelling. It's deeply emotional and compelling. And once again, I feel that I'm privileged to be in a position where I could see the possibility of this because of the technology that we invented, and put it to practice and have sufficient funds that we could at least get it underway. And so we're extremely excited and pleased with where we are. We feel that we are exposing these patients to only prudent risk because we are expert in this technology, and we think we have preliminary evidence of benefit already in a number of patients with these unique diseases. So, it's just another exhilarating moment in my walk through, the life I've had luck enough to stumble into, and and I'm looking forward to really making it a successful charitable foundation. I think we're at least often walking. I
Yeah.
would claim we're often running, but at least we haven't stumbled and we haven't fallen on our face yet. So
Yeah.
it's like Ionis and Anacynth. No one's ever done it before. There's never been anyone who even tried such a thing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of fun because it's um, blazing new ground is always exciting
Yeah.
and interesting. And when you blaze new ground for a purpose that is unquestionably noble, um, and you blaze new ground in which you're actually giving treatment to patients for free for life, which is something that was completely undreamt of before I did it,
Yeah.
um, is once again a privilege.
Yeah.
And so, you mean that, and that's occupying a lot of my time. Of course, I continue to play a very significant role in the scientific processes at Ionis as well, and running the board and all that, of running both boards. So, I remain busy.
Yes, you do. That's awesome. You're doing some great work. That's terrific.
Thank you.
Uh, I, you know, I, again, I think for a lot of the listeners, and I don't know if you necessarily, but want to, but just your experience from the 1980s to now. You know, what do you want your legacy to be? And obviously, you're still blazing it. You know.
Well, I want my legacy to be I did my best. And I came to work every day for the patient, every single day of my career. Never a day when I didn't focus on the patient. And that we did the right thing in the right way and created a platform that is changing the practice of medicine. That's a legacy that I'm proud of. I think I've built a really great company with a wonderful culture and just a remarkable place. And um, and now with n-Lorem, I'm simply taking advantage of all that 30 years of hard work that we put into Ionis and bringing benefit to patients who otherwise are untreatable. They are not candidates for a commercial solution. Given the cost of development, even of an ultra rare drug, one would have to charge $10 to $20 million a year for each patient to make any financial sense of this. So um, it's the beauty of the work we do is the need is obvious. We don't have to create a need as many businesses do. You have a need for a new Mercedes or you have a need for a new Apple. None of that is a part of what we need to do. All we need to do is be smart about picking the need that we think we can fill, and then working diligently with prudent risk to bring a solution to that need. And in a sense, then with n-Lorem, I'm just doing what comes natural to me and what I've been doing for more than 40 years, just with the non-commercial approach to patients who cannot be managed with a commercial solution.
Yeah.
And, I don't think patients and parents should have to raise money for the treatment of themselves or their children. I think that's an indictment of our system. And to be able to do a little something about it, as I end my presentation on n-Lorem, I say, I don't have a grand vision for n-Lorem. I know that if one could measure the total misery in the world, even if we're successful, you can measure what we're doing. but I also know that we are all ends of one. And that if we change the life of a patient, we change the life of a family. If we change the life of a patient and a family, we change the future.
Yeah.
And we change the future in that way, one patient at a time, as we change the future as we make drugs for millions of patients. Um, and so I'm on here, uh, not because I particularly enjoy talking about myself, I don't, but because I need help.
Yeah.
I'm I'm off. I'm saying that we are here, that we are open, our doors are open, and our hearts and minds are open to the needs of these desperate patients, and for whatever help anyone wants to provide us, whether
Yeah.
it's financial or in other ways. And once again, um, I'm privileged to do it, to lead it, and privileged to offer the opportunity to be supportive to those who are listening.
Yeah. That's a terrific mission. Um, I guess some broader general questions. Uh, How do you see the state of science, pharmaceuticals from when you started to where it is now? Are you excited about what you see? Are there things that you don't like that's going on? What's your general feeling of what present day science community?
Well, in terms of science and medicine, this is a unique moment in the history of both. And um, and uh, and when asked to describe Spinraza, I think it's a miracle of three long-term investments in technology: genomics, RNA biology, and antisense.
Mm.
And and so from that perspective, this is the most exhilarating moment in history to be involved in the biological sciences and the therapeutic um, endeavors. And in particular, in the space that we occupy, because um, it's much broader, the opportunity is much broader and richer than we expected even 10 years ago, thanks to all the understanding now of all the functions that RNAs play. Uh, and so the science I'm doing is the best science I've ever done. I measure science, the quality of science is measured by the quality of the questions and the integrity with which you pursue the answers. And we're asking unbelievably high quality questions that were inconceivable to even ask, even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's great. With regard to the pharmaceutical drug discovery and development industry, um, you know, it's been no secret for 40 years that the productivity of drug discovery and development using traditional means is inadequate. And you can see it in the increases in prices for the rare drug that succeeds. So I am pleased that there are more and more investments in novel drug discovery technologies that have the potential to be more efficient. It's an essential task that biotech really has led. None of these advances have occurred in large companies. And so that's another great reason to be alive and to do these things. Um, because the productivity of traditional drug discovery and development methods continues to decline. And so I felt someone had to do something about it and founded Ionis to do that. And we've been lucky enough to survive and make real progress in changing that equation. So the industry needs to become much more focused on novel drug discovery technologies and needs to find a way to make large organizations innovative over the long term. They're not. Um, and, and, um, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Uh, based on past history, you would guess that large pharmaceutical companies are not going to deliver um, on those advances in new drug discovery technology. They're going to have to come from people who found companies focused on those endeavors and hope. And one of the remarkable features that's really fairly unique in history is American capitalism is that there's sufficient capital for such zany ideas as Anasense was in
Yeah.
1980 that you can actually do it. That is an event historically that could have happened only in the United States and only in the times that we're living now. And that entrepreneurship and the ability and willingness to fund extraordinarily risky, unbelievably costly enterprises now has spread to in part to the rest of the world. So that's exhilarating, and it's exhilarating to have been, a small part or played a small part in that process, that construction of the capital structure that makes this possible, and the demonstration that it is possible to create a new technology for drug discovery from scratch, from a blank piece of paper. It isn't hard. It isn't easy. Most of the times you're going to fail. But when you
I would
succeed,
say a big small part, because for the rest of no, I'm serious. For the rest of history,
well,
any sense of
I played.
technologies are going
I
to
got
be
I got to be a participant. I got to be a leader in my own way. And again, I guess the most overused word in this interview is privilege, but it's a privilege, and it's a privilege now that many more people have. Um, and that privilege comes with incredible responsibility, um, which includes to do your best to focus on the patient and tell the truth when you fail. That's not an easy thing for anyone to do. And it's not an easy thing to contemplate the failure of your dreams, to contemplate having to have a whole bunch of people who've depended on you lose their jobs, to have whatever you found put together and then have it fail. So um, that takes a certain level of integrity and courage that I'm gratified to see is taking place more and more frequently.
yeah. For I guess if you had the ability, now looking back, to give yourself, your younger self, a couple lessons or a couple statements, for do you think you would what do you think you would say to your younger self?
I'd probably say giving advice about how to use your life is probably a pretty dumb idea.
Okay.
I think every person who does anything worthwhile has to find his own way,
Yeah.
and uh, so I guess if I were forced to give advice, it would be commit to something that you think has value and invest and do it your way. Prepare for failure, hope for success, and recognize that all you're doing is investing your life. And what would you do that would be more important or exhilarating with your life than what I have been privileged to do?
Yeah.
Just and prepare to fail,
Yeah.
and, and for sure prepare to have some really dark moments because there
Yeah.
are plenty. This is a business of failure.
Yeah.
So, but um, by and large, I refuse to give advice because I don't think I don't think I have any particular wisdom that it would be generically useful to others. I think I'm I'm an odd character, and what I think is fairly idiosyncratic and usually out of step with most people. So it's not that I'm not committed to young people having an opportunity to dream and follow their dreams. I just don't think I'm qualified to advise them. Um,
Yeah, that's fine.
I
No,
think a life of dreams, you ask what separates human beings from other species? It's the ability to dream collectively.
yeah,
And the power of being able to dream collectively is just astonishing. It's reshape the planet.
yeah,
And so dream. Dream big. Why dream small?
yeah,
It's silly. If you're going to dream, dream a big dream and then go to work and make it happen.
yeah,
Dream. Have a dream.
yeah, yeah. Do you
Dream big.
sounds good? Do you? You're very, at least from what I'm gathering in this interview, a pretty optimistic person. Do you have any regrets on, anything that went on in your business career?
Oh, many. I failed a lot. I didn't succeed as well as I wanted to at SKB. I left before I was finished. Um, and we've had lots of disappointments. And, you know, um, so I think a life without regret is a life without purpose, without dreams. If you have purpose and dreams, you will have regrets. Um, but um, you balance those by what you try, what you hope, what you dream, and what you actually achieve. Um, and I am an optimist. I always have been. That's just good brain chemistry. It's just luck. Um, but of course, I have regrets. What human being who's lived as long as I have wouldn't have regrets?
Yeah. I guess, what do you, I mean, obviously, the work that you're doing in n-Lorem and Ionis, what else does I mean, that alone probably is the answer, but, what does the future for Stanley look like or hope to look like?
More of that,
Yeah.
and of course, I continue to be interested in other things, and I do those. I'm interested in history, American history, history of ideas. I'm interested in literature, and I very fell in love with poetry somewhere along when I was a young kid, and um, in, and try to lead as poetic a life as I can, and and have fun.
Yeah.
I have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I have a my days are almost all fun.
Yeah. How is I guess your family in Indianapolis, I mean, how proud have they been of what you've accomplished, from not having any blueprint to, being a CEO for over 30 years and things of that nature?
Um, I haven't spoken to a member of my family in many, many decades.
Okay. All right. No worries. No worries.
Not just, um, I just never had anything in common and don't. So
Yeah.
it's not anger or anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
nothing in common.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I guess, Stanley, was there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to hit on?
I just like to give people the plea to help us with n-Lorem. Go to the n-Lorem website, um, and and write me directly if you're interested, and that's about it.
Yeah. Sounds good. Uh,
Okay.
Stanley, thank you so much for being on. I just want to acknowledge you. Just an incredible story. Uh, if I can say, a living legend. Um, you know, for not having a blueprint at all. For not having parents that graduated high school, to become an MD, PhD, to have a very successful scientific career. And I asked you like, how are you a professor and working in in industry and because that type of work ethic isn't something you see a lot, and so you worked for everything that you got, and you've you know commercialized 23 drugs, and um you know what you're doing now with n-Lorem is absolutely terrific. It takes because it takes someone that has the scientific knowledge and you know foresight to be able to start a foundation like that, and to do it out of goodwill, and um, give the patients you know free care. That's amazing work, and so I just want to thank you for being on, and all the best going forward.
Well, thank you for the kind words, but I'd rather not focus on me and have you focus on n-Lorem.
Sounds good.
So focus on what I'm doing. That's what I really want, not what I've done. That's history. And not who I am. Who cares? What matters is the work I do.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Stanley.
Bye bye.